Listener, make it your life's work to find something, a hobby, a job, something you enjoy as much as Danny Welbeck enjoys scoring against Manchester United. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name's Rory, and I'm joined by my very good friend, Adam. Adam, how we doing, man?
Yeah, very good. It was a very familiar weekend, it's fair to say.
Familiar?
Familiar.
Familiar?
Yeah, very familiar, mate. Didn't have to enjoy any defeats, I'm afraid. But yeah, more importantly, how are things in Milan, Rory?
All good. I want to say a big hello to the Arsenal Milan supporters group. Welcome aboard, guys. I didn't want to be the guy on the group chat who was constantly banging on about my podcast, but it's finally kind of come out, I suppose. And now hopefully a few of them are listening, so I'll see you for the next game, guys. Hopefully it'll be the first one we win when I turn up. I'm pretty sure they don't actually want me to turn up at this point. But yeah, all good. Having less of an existential crisis than I was last weekend, but slightly pissed off we didn't get to talk post-Spurs when I was fully on the we're going to win the league wagon, and now I'm definitely off it. So yeah, a little bit annoyed about that, but can't really complain too much. We'll get into it, I suppose. We will get into it. But the story, before we talk about all the actual football,
Sure.
The headline today, which I think, well, United fans in particular would have been delighted to see get over the line.
Yeah.
How little we knew ye. Anthony has gone on loan to Real Betis. No obligation to buy, as far as I'm aware, obviously. Yep. And United are paying most of his wages, but I think they'll just be happy to have that spirit out of the ground. Adam, I think in a world of Pepe's where he got an absolute kick in, I think Anthony might be the worst signing in Premier League history in terms of amount of money spent to output. I think you're going to struggle to find a signing that's been as catastrophic. Like, do you have any names to throw in to rival him? I think Pepe gets thrown in just because it was 70-odd million, but if you look at his numbers, he actually wasn't that terrible. Whereas I think Anthony was just all-round bad.
Yeah, no, I can think of some really poor Spurs signings. Maybe not on the same scale of funds, but I think in terms of return output. So I'm thinking of the likes of Vincent Janssen, for example.
That was a classic.
Paulinho, for example. That was
just
one
all those signings that they spent the Gareth Bale money on were pretty atrocious.
Pretty horrendous, yes. But then equally, Man United have had some terrible ones, haven't they, down the years? I'm just trying to work out which one's been the worst for value. I think at this moment in time, you could argue maybe Mason Mount is hot on his heels, so to speak. But prior to you actually saying, it requires a fee, I was going to say Ali Dye from Graham Souness days back in Southampton. But yeah, I think Anthony, pound for pound, I think he's one of the worst we've ever seen in the Premier League, it's fair to say.
He's just barely a footballer. I don't know what he does. It's incredible. But I will be keeping an eye on what he does in Spain, and if anything happens, because I feel like it's going to be a very familiar pattern. We will see. But guys, there was lots to talk about in the Premier League this week. Starting off with, obviously, Bournemouth. All their fans waking up at 2:30 in the morning, making a long journey and being massively rewarded by humbling Newcastle on their own pitch. We will be getting to that one in a huge 4-1 win. We'll be talking about Everton 3, Tottenham 2. I can barely say it without laughing. And we'll be talking about Brighton continuing their incredible run against Manchester United as they win at Old Trafford. And yes, we'll be talking about Arsenal throwing away a 2-goal lead and me having a nervous breakdown in the house. Are you happy now? Good. We'll be covering all the rest of the results as well. So let's go for a very quick break. And when we come back, we'll see you on the other side. And we're back. It's time to recap all the Premier League action. And we're starting on Merseyside as we head to Goodison Park. Everton 3, Tottenham 2. Everton racing into a 3-goal lead in the first half. Calvert-Lewin turning into prime R9 with that finish. I have to say, I really enjoyed the double step over from Ndiaye and the finish. Another that was a violent goal, angry run, unbelievable. And then, of course, Gray own goal. I think he's quite unlucky there that he's gone for him. One of the few players at Spurs has been able to hold their head up at any level this season so far. But before we talk about Spurs, let's talk about Everton. Obviously, David Moyes earlier on in the week said, despite only being in charge for one game, he said he was already burnt out, which wasn't it wasn't a massive promising sign for Everton fans. But Adam, this is the first time that Everton have scored 3 goals in a very long time. You're going to have the statistic, I think. But David Moyes making an impact, a bit of an atmosphere, a bit of spirit at the old ground.
Yeah, and I think there was definitely a lot of kind of anticipation that perhaps David Moyes would return back some of kind of that feeling back to the supporter base anyway. But I think what was quite telling, and it's something that has been kind of uncovered post this game, I think, was that David Moyes said it in a press conference midweek prior to this game that Everton had to apply themselves and be more hungry for this game because they knew that Spurs were pretty wounded, it's fair to say, in recent games. And if they weren't applying themselves in the right manner, then Spurs would punish them in terms of their technical aspects, which we know technically Spurs are a really good side, but it is just the fact that they are kind of lethargic in terms of their play. And that was very evident in this particular game. And to that stat that you mentioned, this is the first time that Everton have scored 3 goals in the first half since February 2017. We've got a few stats, it's fair to say, Rory. I won't dwell on them too much at this stage. We will probably uncover them as we go along. But in terms of that game, I mean, it went from any kind of optimism levels that Spurs had in terms of defending Ange to absolute zilch. There was nothing by the end of that first half. It was dreadful game from a Spurs perspective to let the manner of those goals go past you, no matter what level it is, Rory. I think it's just fundamentals you're getting really badly wrong. And it was interesting to see kind of a sense of pragmatism from Ange in that second half when he made some changes, which were needed, it's fair to say. But by that point, it was too late, Rory. It was far too late. And unfortunately, I'm still surprised that we're saying Ange Postecoglu is still the manager of Spurs. I'm genuinely surprised at that. But equally, we've said so many times on this podcast, when we're talking about Spurs, it is fundamentally deep-rooted. It's nothing necessarily to do with Ange, but he is partially responsible for their form right now, Rory. But let's be positive about Everton at the same time. That was really good display. Gives them a lot of hope in terms of what they can do going forward. I appreciate probably they wouldn't have liked the fact that they conceded 2 goals in that same process.
I was going to say, they did their best to throw it away.
They did. You could see the faces of the fans in the Gladys end all cringing as soon as they knew there was like 4 minutes of added time to be played and Spurs were pelting crosses into that box. But yeah, I think that at least builds some momentum for Everton, gets them firmly out of those places and potentially puts them within reach, should I say, of pulling themselves out of that relegation battle. Because whilst they're not fundamentally out of it right now, I think they've got the potential of dragging the likes of the Spurs and potentially West Ham into that dogfight as well right now, Rory. What was your overriding thoughts? I mean, obviously, we will talk Spurs, but from an Everton perspective, what was the fundamental changes that you thought were quite a Moyes-esque kind of thing?
Well, I thought, look, they're still going to be like, Moyes is always going to be defensively solid, but the idea is you catch them on the break and you're forward thinking. Now, I think that, like, with Sean Dyche, there was only, like, I want to say, 2 games where they scored more than 1 goal. Like, he was very much score 1 and sit on it. Whereas I think David Moyes isn't against getting a second and a third and a fourth. He's not against attacking football. He's just obviously defensive minded first. So I think what we did see, like as you said at the beginning, we saw a manager that saw a team that was wounded, that was vulnerable, and thought, right, here is an opportunity for us to get our confidence up, to get a huge win, to get the goals and really put a statement down and be like, look, this is a new team now. We can score more than one goal, and we can get like Goodison Park when it's roaring and it's not booing and it's full of atmosphere is a really fucking difficult place to play. And I think this is a big marker in David Moyes being like, we're going to turn this place into a fortress again. And like, you know, even if it's not a fortress, a place where you're going to leave knowing you've been in a game.
Yeah.
And I think it's just that spirit. Whereas towards the end with Dyche, and we've heard the stories about, he was hanging on for the payoff, and everyone knew he was gone, and it was all just kind of going through the motions. This is like a big revamp, and I think this is like that marquee result that can be like, right, new chapter, here we go. And I think just the sheer like violence they attacked with, like the pace that they were running at Spurs with, like, and Ndiaye is such a great player. Like, he's a really exciting player. Like, he was unbelievable for Sheffield United in the Championship. He had I think he like did okay at Marseille, but struggled to really cement the place down. But we know that there's a player there that if you can get his confidence up, he will cause problems to anyone. Like, genuinely, that double step over in the finish was fantastic. And you can see the Spurs players like shitting themselves when he was running at him. And I think just that, like, the attacking chains were taken off a little bit, and they were told, like, you can go. Like, let's see what we can do. I really enjoyed seeing Jake O'Brien at right back. I feel like he didn't really... There may have been injuries, but I also feel like he didn't really get a chance under Dyche as well. Obviously, that's with my Irish hat on. I'd be quite happy for him to get some consistent Premier League minutes, but I was really excited to see him. I thought he did very well. Gay in midfield, and Mangala's quietly doing okay. I feel like there is a player there that could be really good for them. And they just allowing them to attack a little bit more. And I think, obviously, Moyes will always be a bit more defensive-minded, but they really went for it. And I think that's all the Everton fans want, is just like a team that's going to go for it and try and win a game, and not just try and score one. And, like, if it's 0-0, that's fine. We'll take it. And because I think that is how the Dyche thing ended, was like, if the referee like blew the whistle 0-0 and then blew the whistle immediately and everyone left, Sean Dyche would have been delighted. Like, I think he would have been like, "Yep, deal, fair play, thank you," and then he would have left. Whereas I think they've actually got a manager that wants to win games now. So I think that's the main difference, honestly. And obviously the mood around the place, because he's like an icon at that club. Yeah. But let's talk about Spurs. Let's talk about Postecoglu. I'm going to pick up on your remark about you're surprised about the fact he's still in charge. I think he's going to be given till the end of the season, unless they somehow find themselves in the relegation zone. I think he's going to get to the end of the season, and then there's going to be a conversation, and they might replace him with whatever other poor bastard they choose to take over that club. But I think he's going to get until the end of the season. The issue here is, and like I realise you have to caveat it with Spurs have a lot of injuries, and they do have a lot of injuries. But I want to say, as an Arsenal fan, we also have a horrendous amount of injuries. And what our manager is doing is adapting and coming up with other plans so that, okay, maybe we don't win as many matches as we should be doing, but we're not losing games. We're not getting battered. We're still second. Like, we are making arrangements to deal with the injuries. Now, these defenders have been out for a really long time. I know Archie Gray isn't a centre-back, and I feel bad for the lad. Like, I genuinely do, because I feel like, despite the fact he's playing well, you worry what a long-term kick to the nuts can do to the confidence of a young player, like, if it's long-term, if you know what I mean. But you've had this defence now of Davies, Dragusin and Gray, or... By now, you should be able to figure out how to get this to work better, even if it's not your dream defense, right? Even if it's not Romero and Van de Ven, you should be able to drill them, coach them, find a system that means that they are better than they are currently performing. And by the way, it's not like Spurs defensively were fantastic when they did have Romero and Van de Ven. Like, they're not a good team defensively anyway. But I think he's had long enough now, despite the injuries, to try and make this a little bit more stable than it is, and more organised than it is, because the way they were running away from the Everton players as they were bombing forward was just like kids in a playground, like just try and get something in front of the ball, like zero plan. I feel like there's only so much sympathy you can have with Postecoglu when it comes to dealing with the injuries, when he's seemingly not dealing with the injuries. Like, so I think, I know it's a mitigating factor, but it's also a kind of, not a symptom, but a clue as to what is wrong at Spurs, that then he's not adapting. He's not trying to get the best out of this situation that he finds himself in, even if it is a pretty shitty situation, right? And we all understand that. But I still think there's no excuse for that level of performance. Like, from the players, from top to bottom, they were just absolutely atrocious. And this is where I think Do they still play for Postecoglu? Like, are they still playing for him? It's one of those performances where you think, are they just handing it in now? Like, because they're sick of. We kind of talked about a little bit about how Ange was kind of like Russell Martin, and he was sending his players out to get embarrassed every week.
Yeah.
Are the players starting to get sick of it now? Like, I'll let you actually speak now. Like, do you feel like there's a little glimmer of truth to that?
I mean, there has been a little bit of a whisper that, and I don't know how legit this is, but again, I'll call it quotation rumor,
Mm-hmm.
that the hanging out of Timo Werner wasn't kind of viewed as a really professional way of dealing with the situation, whereas I think most would have preferred it being in house and maybe spoken in those circles where the player takes that responsibility in front of the younger kids, but not to the levels that has been displayed in that environment. And I think potentially Ange's man management skills have to be questioned here as well, because he talks about giving these players faith, etc. But there also needs to be a sense of like, is that the right kind of individual that can cope with that level of scrutiny? And we know how much scrutiny Premier League players get overall anyway, so it becomes to that point where this feels personal. And I appreciate the levels of display wasn't great from Tino Werner. I think everyone pretty much could say that his levels this season haven't been great. But that's where you kind of say, look, took him off for a tactical reason. I had a word with him in personal. And that's it. That's all you have to say on that situation. You don't need to publicly hang him out to dry like the Russell Martin situation where it was pretty much suicidal. And I just wonder, to your point as well, how many of those players actually really are fighting for him right now? I think some of these younger players that you mentioned, like Archie Gray, for example, I think Lucas Bergvall as well, they're probably doing the responsibility that a natural leader should be doing in that squad, but they don't have enough of those kind of caliber players within it. I just think they haven't got the right blend. And this all goes down to that kind of strategy of how they're going about this team building exercise. I don't see what the benefits. You have to go through some pain points, right? When you're trying to assemble something, it doesn't always go smoothly, and sometimes you have to ride out those really tough periods to then experience some growth. And I think that's, no matter what industry you're in, you all experience it. But you come to a point where it's almost like it is what we are. That's that mentality that Ange alludes to. Well, I'm afraid it's getting to a point that it's so tired. He's getting tired of being asked about these same questions, and he keeps on saying that that's what he's going to do. So I think ultimately, if I'm the hierarchy at Spurs, I'm kind of thinking, is this a guy that I want to kind of put my trust in going forward? Do I feel that he's going to progress us? I think that's the fundamental questions, is that they've got to ask themselves, can they ride this out? And can they build something? I just, for the life of me, Rory, I think it's the caliber of the strategy is wrong. It just doesn't feel like they're getting the type of individuals that they need right for the now and what they need for the future. There is two fundamental differences here. I think they're buying for the future at the moment with a lot of the players that they've got right now. But the problem is that with this experience, you don't know how they're reacting to it personally and how they're dealing with it on the pitch. I think that's very fundamental. You can see that they've got a lack of confidence right now, and they don't necessarily, I personally don't feel they trust the formation, they trust the football that they're playing right now. And if Ange is saying he's not going to change, I think that forces your hand to actually try and change the situation. And if I'm a chairman, I'm probably going to play the trigger and, just say, do you know what? Thank you for everything you've achieved. I just think we need to get some pragmatism. If you're not going to do it, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. But I just can't see us, like, we can't afford to get relegated, is what I would ultimately be saying to Ange right now. And if he believes that's the way, then unfortunately, I think you depart on terms, and that's it. That would be my thinking, Rory. But I appreciate also that you have to build sometimes, and these are the points that you have to go through if you want to build a success. You have to grind these kind of periods out. But I don't see any hope at the moment. I think you can see even Spurs fans are just tired. they're just tired of this now. They want this to end right now. And it is becoming to a point where that joke of it's Spursy is also getting tired on us, on people that are neutral to this whole situation. I feel sorry for Spurs fans. I feel they're almost on level with Everton fans. Maybe not you, Rory, but they're almost on level with Everton fans where they're going into Samaritans at this case because, what hope do they have at this team?
I think I still but I still think whenever the conversation comes up of right, they should sack the manager, the next question is, okay, well, who do you bring in? Right?
Yeah.
Who are you going to get that's going to do a better job? Now, a lot of people would say anyone could do a better job in terms of results, right? Like you could bring in David Moyes to Spurs now and he would get better results than Ange Postecoglu is getting. I'm absolutely certain of it, right?
Yeah.
I'm not thick, right? But I think the club wants this new identity, right? The club wants this attacking Spurs football. We're going to blow teams away. We're going to build the team in the image of this man. We're going to, this is going to be our philosophy. Well, then you have to fucking stick to it. You have to stick to it and you have to say, we're going to give you the season. And if, let's say they finish 10th this season, they have a bit of a turn up at the end of the season, they finish around 10th, you can go, okay, that season was a bit mad, but now you're going to get a few more of your players. We're going to get rid of the ones that aren't that interested and you can build and progress a little bit more. I think they have to give him till the end of the season and then see where they stand and give him another window. Because I do think, even though he's ridiculously unpragmatic and they will never win anything like a league title underneath him, they might win a cup with him. I think they could probably do that. But with this madcap football, you're never going to win a league title. It's just not going to happen. But if they want that kind of free-flowing attacking football, you can build the team in his image. I think he can get you to a European level, to qualifying for Champions Leagues, to qualifying for Europa Leagues, etc. I think that would be his limit, but I think he can do that. I don't know if there's a manager out there beyond Andoni Iraola who I don't think is going to accept the Spurs job. No. Who you could really go and immediately just be take out and be like, okay, it's attacking football. It's a philosophy. It's an exciting young coach. He's going to come in and get improved results. I don't know if there's any off the top of my head who's going to come in. So I think that's always my primary answer is, okay, but who? So I think they have to give Postecoglu until the end of the season.
I just to say, I would add just one candidate. It will make us both laugh, and I'd love this to happen, but Massimo Allegri. Just because of vibes.
Stick the handbrake on. Absolutely stick the handbrake on. Well, I think they might still be mentally scarred by the last Italian coach they had, but I would love to see it. God, I would love to see it. But I think also whilst Ange is there, it takes a little bit of the stick away from Daniel Levy. Although I do feel like that is getting less and less. And I feel like a lot of the Spurs fans do realise that it's actually Daniel Levy and Enoch that are really the problem. And that their transfer policy, you made an interesting point. I think, look, Bergvall, I don't like him, but he's going to be a hell of a player, that lad. Archie Gray is going to be a hell of a player. They are buying young, good players. You can see what the idea is there. But yeah, their transfer business, I think, just hasn't really, beyond Kulusevski, who's been fantastic. There's not really a player that you'd be they've bought in and has really kicked on. Bentancur could have done, but he keeps getting injured. He was playing pretty well, but kept getting injured. Romero, I've never rated anyway. Van de Ven is decent when he's running in a straight line, but he gets exposed quite a lot, I think. So I think Kulusevski is the only player they brought in that's been a success of a player who's now. Yeah. So I think there needs to be a whole review of their transfer strategy and the level of players they get. And we talked about it, I feel like we talked about it 6 months ago, 5 months ago. They get the players that other teams decide not to go for. They get for James Maddison. They go for James Maddison when every other top 5 club looked at him and went, no. And Spurs went, right, we'll get him. And then they get Jed Spence, a young player that every other top 5 club looked at and went, I'm not sure. Okay, we'll get him. When what they should be doing is trying to get the players that those teams are also fighting for. This Vitor Reis that has just signed for City. Arsenal and City were both going for him, and they were both this is the player we want, right? If Spurs want to be that club, they have to be going for those players, and you have to spend that money. If you so it is Daniel Levy and the ownership that are hanging the club out to dry. So while they are there, it doesn't matter who the fucking manager is. It doesn't matter. I feel like I'm in the twilight zone. We've had this exact conversation. Mourinho was fucking shit. Conte was fucking shit. Pochettino was all right for a bit until they chased him out of the club for some reason. Like, all the managers that go there fail. So it doesn't matter. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. I think you've got to give them to the end of the season and just hope that the players, this is a bad day at the office and they turn this round at some point. Unfortunately for them, they've already played Southampton, so they've not even got their voucher to cash in. Like, where do they get their next win? This has to be arrested soon, right?
It does. And I feel we're talking about the same things again and again and again. But to your point that you made earlier, there has to be a change of making it more difficult for them to get beaten, right? They need to get to a point where let's just go out and get a draw. Let's go out and get a clean sheet. We just need to build on something fundamental like that and then follow it up with, again, the same principle. Let's do the same thing again. I think that's where it's got to go to. But again, I feel like we're talking about being pragmatic and losing that identity that Andrew's trying to establish. But you need to get to a point where you're getting points now. This isn't about losing your identity. You can still implement your identity come the summer with these players. You can go, look, it didn't work. Let's work on a strategy that goes forward that will implement the style of football that we want to do. But you have to incorporate some form of pragmatism, whether that be formation or the players that play within that structure. You've got to work on that. And I just feel they've got to do something as fundamental as change the formation to make us harder to beat. Don't even try and all go forward at the same time. You need to be much more to a point where you're actually suffocating the opposition from actually scoring in your goal. That's what you've got to start off with. It's very fundamental. If it doesn't matter what level of football you're at, even Rory. If I was my boys' team and I see that they're all defending for their lives, I'm happy with that. They're trying to do something here. I just despair when I'm talking about Spurs because it feels like we're saying pragmatism as in that format, whereas he feels we're trying to say dismantle the rule book of what he's trying to implement. No, that's not what we're trying to say. We're just trying to say you've got to earn some points now. Do you see where you are in the table? Do you not understand that you need to work on some basics? I don't know, Rory. I feel we're getting to a point of being like Man United and we're getting tired of talking about the same things again and again and again.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. We've had this conversation 4 or 5 times, but they have got Leicester City at home, which is next, which is as close to a Southampton voucher as you're going to get, I think, at the moment. But if they do not win against Leicester City at home, then there needs to be some conversations because that would be. See you next week for the same conversation, right? See you next week.
We'll bookmark it now.
Yeah. We'll cut and paste this conversation, throw it in next week. It'll be fine. But yeah. Huge win for Everton. We do need to give credit to Everton, but obviously the headline here is more kind of Spurs and just their general shitness. But let's leave that one there. It did make me feel a little bit better about my weekend, honestly. I'm so glad that them in United are doing so bad this year. It makes it takes a bit of the sting out in terms of Arsenal's season. But let's move to the next one then. Manchester United 1, Brighton 3. Minte within the first 5 minutes. Mitoma getting a goal and Ruta in the 76th minute. Fernandes with a penalty. This was the least surprising result going for Brighton.
Yeah, when you consider that the last 2 occasions they turned up at Old Trafford, they also won. So they have now matched Manchester City as being the second team to go up to Old Trafford and win 3 consecutive times. And this is back-to-back for a Brighton side. And Brighton really did what we expected, I think, Rory. I think they really did take it to Man United. They really did know how to deal with their wingers in Mitoma and Minte. I think what was really interesting was whilst they did apply the intensity at the right moments, they also tracked back. And this is the kind of pragmatism that we're talking about with what, Spurs should be doing. This is the difference between someone that's trying to balance that style of football also in the final third, but also being pragmatic at the back. And I think they all did the fundamentals really well. I think the main difference is we're highlighting Man United again having the same issues, that they go through a series of results that it looks like they're promising, that it looks like they're building on something, and then they have a game like this. Obviously the warning signs were there for Man United in the previous game anyway, as it was, but they go into this game, and I think there's been a lot made of, obviously, Ruben Amorim's kind of comments about this
calling
being
the entire team shit.
Yeah, shit, worst team in 47-year history of Man United, or 147-year history, should I say? But yeah, I don't know what you make of the whole situation. But let's just quickly give credit to Brighton. I think they applied it with the right intensity. Hertzler in great vein of form, because that's now 6 games unbeaten, which I did make a note was the best run for the club since 2022. So they are pushing on the Hertzler. And yeah, I think when you look at the kind of blend of players as well, they're not necessarily players that are, at a certain level. They're all hardworking players, but they've all got their own attributes. And yeah, I think Danny Welbeck, what a phenomenal striker he is as well. He's such a great, underrated player at this level. I know he doesn't necessarily have the goal scoring record, but he hustles. And I think that's the difference sometimes at this level. Sometimes it's not all about getting the goals, it's all about the hustling. But yeah, just all across the pitch for me, Rory, they did really well. So a lot of credit to Brighton. But let's put it to you in this way: Man United, where do you see Amorim kind of going now? Because I think a lot has been made of him hang out these players, him making the point of, they're not working possibly as hard as they possibly should be. This is the worst team that he thinks he's experienced. I think he also alluded to the fact that this was one of the hardest things that he's had to face in his career. And I suppose he's had a relatively successful career, so this is definitely something new to him as well. But at what point do you kind of say Amorim has to take responsibility for these results? Because I did see a lot of reaction of get rid of him because he's not actually changing the mentality here. Which is mental. It's mental.
Sorry, but could you imagine sacking him already? It'd be so funny. I know it's been really shit, but it would be so funny if they just sacked him instantly. I think he's not doing any better of a job than Ten Hag would have done. Like, I think it's really hard to argue that Ten Hag would have them in a higher or lower position than they are now. Like, I think it's just exactly the same as it would have been. Obviously, there's a change in system, and there's a kind of like, this is the start of this new project, and are they going to stick with it? I think, look, he is obviously a very good manager. Like, he ended Sporting's fucking wait for the trophies. He had, was it Vittorio Guimaraes he was at before, where he was incredible with them as well. Like, he's a very good coach. They've got the most exciting manager they could have got. I think he needs to slow down a little bit with the calling out the players constantly. I think, there's one player in particular who I think, again, and maybe it's just the young players, but I worry about Lenny Yoro because he's obviously a very, very exciting defender. And I think, obviously, I see everything through an Arsenal lens, so I apologise, but it reminds me of when Arsenal signed William Saliba. And what we did with Saliba was we sent him out on loan a few times because he wasn't quite good enough. He wasn't quite at the level. He needed a bit more experience, somewhere where the spotlight wasn't going to be on him so much and he could develop. And then we brought him back to the club when we thought he was ready. Now, obviously, Man United don't really have the luxury of being able to do that because they need centre-backs now, they need defenders now. But I feel like he's a player that could really do with that at the moment, and not being in the Manchester United starting lineup, and just send him out on loan to France for a year, stick him in Lille or whatever, let him get his feet and another year below his belt. And I feel like someone like that is kind of symptomatic of what's happening at Manchester United. He will be a very good defender in 5 years' time when Amorim is there. Hopefully, I genuinely hope it works for him, and I hope he does well. And he could be a key part of that team. But a lot of these players are going to go through horrendous times in the meantime while they get through the growing pains and start this transition of whatever it is. Yeah. And I think even players like Ahmad, who isn't actually as young as you think he is, like he's obviously able to deal with it a bit better. He's got a bit more experience. He can he single-handedly fished them out of the shit in that Southampton game. Like, so there are some young players stepping up, but I worry about players like Mainu and whoever else that like, if the short term doesn't get better quick, these players are just going to start dipping again, like we've seen with Rashford and like we've seen with 1,000 other players at Manchester United. But I think Amorim just needs to slow down on the making it sound like it's solely the player's responsibility. I think he has to again, sorry, through an Arsenal lens, but with Arteta in general, when the team have played like shit, he's blamed himself. And he's been like, I made mistakes today. I got it wrong. I need to look at what I can do better. And I think that's why the players have bought into him a lot, because he will just take the shit even when they've just phoned it in. So I think Amorim needs to do a little bit more of that, as opposed to just being like, this is the worst Manchester United team in history. Because I think he's using it as a crutch now of like, well, what do you expect me to do with this shit? And it's not conducive with having a great dressing room atmosphere. And we know that at United, the dressing room atmosphere wasn't exactly fucking Disneyland in the first place, if you know what I mean. It was pretty grim. So, like, I don't know if it really needs another kick in. But I also think Brighton are the perfect team to play against Manchester United. They're just the perfect... Like, Manchester United could not play more into their hands if Brighton wanted. Like, they just absolutely tore them to pieces. And, like, I know like Welbeck didn't score, but the way he enjoyed that goal and the way he enjoyed the performance in general. And like, I saw a great tweet from a United fan was like, 10 years ago, we sold Welbeck because he was our worst striker. And now he'd probably be our best striker, like, which just says everything about what has happened to United in that time, like, and the level of quality there. But it was nice to see Xerxes start. I think he's earned that start. I know we keep going on about Xerxes, but I think he earned that start. I don't know if we get another one now, but I think he earned that start in his last couple of performances. But it all, again, comes down to, again, fucking the defence and Onana. Like, I know it's just a one-off mistake again, but he makes so many of these, and it just, again, it screams out to a defensive unit that just have no faith in each other. Like, they're all so nervous that the second one thing goes wrong, they're all just like pointing at each other or making mistakes or out of position. It was shambolic. It was absolutely shambolic. And I think it is concerning that there hasn't been a raise of level against the teams you would expect them to beat. Because it's all well and good to go out and draw against Liverpool and beat us on penalties, but you've got to fucking smash Southampton at home. You just have to. Like, you fucking have to. And I watched that game, and Southampton deserved... If they could hit a barn door, they would have been 3-4 up in the first half. Sulemana looked incredible and should have had 2 or 3 goals. Like, it was embarrassing how bad they were. So I think Amorim really needs to be taking a bit more of the responsibility here. But I don't know if he will.
No, I definitely agree. And on that point around defensive line, I was just thinking just then, the amount of appearances, the individuals, if we take away Lenny Yoro out of the equation, the likes of Maguire, De Ligt, for example, Diego Dalot, for example, even from a left-back perspective, Maserari, or left wing-back, whatever role you kind of call it, they've all got within them probably plus 300 to 400 appearances club domestically, but also they've got international experience between all 4 of them. Are you saying between the 4 of them that they can't organise a defensive line that can,
apparently, no,
it just genuinely baffles me. I was thinking that as you were speaking about it, and I was thinking, even with Onana being the experience that he's got from an international as well as domestic point of view, you kind of think you've had potentially played with players that have been of a higher caliber. You're bringing yourself to Man United. You saying that you haven't got the foresight of understanding or just reading of the game. That's all it seems to be. It seems to be a really underrated skill from a defensive point of view. But we always used to allude to, when I was supporting Wycombe Wanderers, you used to get those kind of older players drop down the leagues because they obviously haven't got the pace as they used to, but they had fantastic reading of the game. And that seems to be just missing. It seems like that they're not communicating with each other. I think that's the fundamentals. Clearly here, Rory, we're talking about fundamental skills that they should be implementing in games that they just don't do. And I don't understand what is it. And you have to say that's got to be something similar to what my point with Ange is. You have to work on some fundamentals. Clearly, I thought they were getting there off the back of that Arsenal game, because the way they kind of displayed, in particular for that game, you kind of thought, right, there's some growing confidence within that squad. But actually, I look at this and the performance, as you alluded to, from Southampton, you kind of go, they haven't learned. They haven't really pushed on, and they're not taking responsibility. So there has to be some joint ownership here, that you kind of say, right, I'll give you some opportunities to actually prove yourself. Otherwise, you're out of the door. That's got to be the policy from Amorim's point of view. And from a player's perspective, you've got to be displaying better than you have been, showing recently. I just think players like De Ligt, I never rated him, but surely with the experience that you've got, you should be reading situations a lot better than you are right now.
Well, their defending against Arsenal was absolutely fantastic. It was frustratingly good. They were
exactly.
very, very good. So they're clearly capable of doing it, just not doing it for some reason. But that's enough time on United and Spurs, honestly. We've done like 40 minutes. I think we've delayed enough talking about Arsenal that we probably need to talk about them now. I was hoping we'd run out of time. But yeah, a huge win for Brighton. And it's... The issue for Hertzler has been consistency, and it's good to see them getting a little bit of consistency and kind of getting a run together, because I think they've had they've got these big marquee wins and then just followed it up with a crap performance. And I think it's a big learning curve for him and the team under him, because there's a lot of young players, right, to start getting these strings of performances together, and that just adds a lovely little run for them and puts them back in the kind of European contention, down in 9th place, but only 4 points behind City in 5th. So it's all tight there for the Europa League, Conference League spots, and I'm sure they'll be involved in the conversation. But another team that will be involved in the conversation, Aston Villa in 8th on 36 points, now unbeaten in 4, coming from 2 goals down to draw 2-2 against Arsenal. Let's talk about Aston Villa before I have whatever happens. But what really impressed me is that Emery fucking hates Arsenal and is delighted to get results against us. Ollie Watkins fucking despises us. It was a hell of a finish from him. We'll get to Thomas Partey later. And Yuri Tielemans, absolutely unbelievable performance from him. I didn't realise he could run as much as he did against us. I've never seen him run that much before. But Villa, I think overall it was just a spirit in this game, right? That they never really, even because I think when Arsenal went 2-0 up, at least I was sat a little bit more comfortable on the sofa. But Villa genuinely were like, no, we're still in this. And they didn't stop going, did they? The bastards.
Yeah, they always say 2-0 is a dangerous scoreline, don't they? So unfortunately, it did come to bite Arsenal. But I did think that was also not helped by the way Arsenal reacted in those situations, in particular to those goals. But we'll park that to the side. For now, credit to the spirit, as you alluded to, from a Aston Villa perspective. I didn't think they necessarily had a lot of great performances in that squad for that particular game, but as you highlighted, Tielemans, I think for pure determination, that was inspirational from a point of view that he was trying to make the best of the opportunities that they had and most of the possession that they had as well. Because they were really reliant on, I suppose, a lot of the crossing as well that was coming into the box.
They were both fantastic crosses for the goals as well. They were unbelievable.
Yeah. And I think that was fundamental to how Aston Villa got themselves into the game. When you consider the XG stats, you can see that they didn't have much. They didn't have generally much of the game itself, which I suppose in some respects is credit to Arsenal for trying to nullify that threat. But it does feel like with Aston Villa that they seem to have this hold, or Emery has at least, over Arsenal in terms of just having 1 or 2 chances. That seems to be fundamentally the difference. But I think, Rory, we'll just have to highlight it was the defending, wasn't it? The defending for those very moments. The first one, I think Moreno was too soft on Tielemans. When Tielemans makes that, he has to do better. There was another incident where Moreno almost let, I think it was Tielemans again, have a shot on goal, and he was just too placid. Just let him go past him. It was too easy. But then even for Watkins' goals, I think I want to say it was one of the centre-backs that just
Thomas Partey who fucking runs out, does a 5-yard run for no fucking reason. It just... He's
not a right back,
it is
ultimately.
mental what he does. It is I have a myriad of reasons for not wanting him anywhere near the first team.
Yeah.
I cannot wait for June the 30th for this guy to just be out of the pissing club. Like, I'm just absolutely sick of him. I can't deal with it. It's embarrassing that the club are playing him. It's a stain on Arteta. It's a stain on the club. I agree with every fan that wants to give us a kicking for it. And now I'm really pissed off because he's playing like shit as well and costing us games, right? But I think it's just... I can't... There was a really interesting moment post that goal where Declan Rice just chews him out for about... Honestly, while like the Villa players are celebrating and the team are going back, both Gabriel and Declan Rice are just going at him and like really going at him about what the hell are you doing? You just cost us the game. Like, but I have to say, this result doesn't happen if William Saliba's on the pitch.
Yeah.
If William Saliba's on the pitch, we don't lose this game. I'm telling you. Like, both of those crosses are dealt with. And Aston Villa don't barely have a sniff all game. I think I'm just sick of talking about Arsenal playing well and not winning. I feel like every game I've been like, oh, we played well, but I'm sat here disappointed. Because I think everything about our performance was great, except those two moments. And then those two moments punish it. And I think this just kind of feels like the season that Arsenal are having. Like, the tiniest little mistake is being punished in the heaviest possible, possible terms, whether it's Declan Rice kicking the ball away or us shooting ourselves in the foot or injuries on injuries on injuries that are just absolutely battering us. And like, the thing with injuries, it's a vicious circle, right? You get injuries because you can't rotate. So then you have more injuries, so you can rotate even less. So then you pick up more injuries, so you can rotate even less, so you pick up more injuries. And that's what's happening now. We have 13 fit players, basically. We had 11 players on the pitch and Raheem Sterling and 5 left-backs, right? Like, we have nothing. And I think even when this game, before the game kicked off, I was like, we need to get this won in the first half. We need to be like 3-0 up, and then second half we can just coast the game. Because as the game goes on, Villa can bring on Leon Bailey. They can bring on John Duran. They can bring on Marlon, right? They have a stronger bench than we do attacking-wise, right? So I knew that the longer the game went on, there's nothing we can do to affect games at the moment. And like, you can feel it in the state, like you can see it in the stadium as well, where the fans are like, the second it went 2-2, the fans were like, fuck, we've got nothing. We've got, like, Raheem Sterling, I've got nothing against you, but it's just not working. It's just not working.
Yeah.
And like, you could just see, like, the players on the pitch are giving everything. They are. Kai Havertz was really effective in this game. Trossard was unbelievable. Martinelli out of position was fantastic. All the players are running themselves into the ground to get these results, but they can't rest. So they can't play for 90 minutes. And it's when I see Jamie Carragher post-match, or whenever it was, saying it's about mentality that Liverpool are at the top, I'm going to fucking scream. Like, it is not mentality as to why we're not top, mate. It just isn't. It's because we've lost Ødegaard for a massive part of the season. We've lost Saka for a massive part of the season. Yeah. We've played the same defence about 3 times across the whole season. Like, we have no players. Are you fucking thick? Like, it's not just the Liverpool players want it more and have been there. Like, it's the most base level of fucking analysis I've ever heard in my life. Just look at our bench and you can see where the problem is. Like, it's just obvious. And this is why any Arsenal fans that are getting, you know, sack Arteta, and they're only doing it for clicks, I know, but sack Arteta or sack the board or whatever. Although if the board don't sign anyone in January, I may be on the sack the board train. You can, like, Arteta is doing everything he fucking can here. Like, he's brought in Miles Lewis-Skelly, who has been unbelievable since he came in. He's also playing out of position, by the way. He's a midfielder, and he's arguably our best left back at the minute. Actually, is our best left back at the minute. Like, Arteta is getting everything out of this squad that he can. He needs some help from the owners. It's that simple. I think, like, with a winger and a striker, we win that game. With William Saliba not being out for 2-3 weeks, we win that game. Like, I just can't believe it. We can't buy another defender. All we've done is buy defenders for 6 years, and we've got no defenders. Like, the injury crisis, like, Ben White is injured, Tomiyasu's injured, Calafiori's injured, like, Saliba's injured. Any more? Like, it's horrendous. And I think the fact that Arteta has even got us in second is frankly a miracle. Like, I think it's unbelievable.
I was just going to point out, do you think he could have in those latter minutes shored it up by putting Jorginho or Kivor into that kind of back line. I appreciate this is the what if kind of scenario, right? And I appreciate there's not been a lot of trust in terms of Kivor's kind of form. Same could go for Jorginho, that, he's not the kind of caliber player. But I just feel, given the momentum was swinging potentially at that very moment, it was 2-1. Could that have just solidified that team at that very moment to grind out that result? I just, from a kind of constructive point of view, and I appreciate, look, I will say, look, fantastic work, as you allude to. I think it's phenomenal that Arteta's been able to maintain the kind of, I suppose, form in terms of getting this team into second position, given the injury crisis as well. But I do wonder whether there's potentially a moment there, swapping Odegaard for Jorginho. Could that have just shored it up? What is Odegaard going to do differently that he couldn't do at 2-1, for example? Those are the little moments, right?
I think, maybe when it goes 2-1, do you just go, right, we're going to grind it out and do what we did at City and just hope we don't concede late? I don't know. But I think even Jorginho went off injured in the last game he played, right? I don't know if he's actually fit or he was just on the bench. So there's bodies on the bench that possibly aren't actually fit. So I think Arteta was thinking, well, what we need now, Villa are going to throw everything at us, including pace. Is Jorginho the best player to deal with pace? I'm not sure. All of it is sticking plasters over problems at the moment. I think, again, everything about the performance was good. It was just those 2 moments. And I feel like we're just being punished very heavily at the moment. But the fact that mathematically is still possible, hopefully we can sign some players. And Liverpool's last 5 games are harder than our last 5 games. Means I'm still not giving up hope yet. It's still alive. We just need a fucking attacker and some players back. Apparently Ben White is very close to being back, so we never have to see Thomas Partey at right back again, because it's going to kill me if that happens one more time. And then we can start building something, maybe, and kind of get some warm bodies on the pitch, because Arteta can't be more obvious about it now. In every post-match, he's like, I have no players. What do you expect me to do? So, anyway, that's my rant over. And Jamie Carragher, again, just fuck off. But elsewhere in the Premier League, the results elsewhere, let's talk about it very quickly, because we've spent a lot of time talking about all those games. Sorry, listener. Obviously, my own personal counselling comes ahead of your listening pleasure. I apologise. But let's go through the results. We've not even talked about Newcastle-Bournemouth, Adam. No. We're nearly an hour. Newcastle 1, Bournemouth 4. We opened the show with them as well. Clivert with a hat-trick. Kirkes continues his incredible season. Andoni Iraola, Bournemouth, without Forest, they would be the story of the season, right?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think, although they've been kind of lingering in that kind of mid-table area, I think they're starting to get the right kind of form right now. Iraola, we've been shouting out his flowers for a long time, it's fair to say, Rory. We've been a fan of his. And I think fundamentally, when you consider they also have an injury crisis going on themselves, and they're not necessarily his players, I would say, on the vast majority in terms of the squad itself, I think he's just been superb. And for that point as well, Eddie Howe, I think he will regret the manner of this game. I think they probably underestimated Bournemouth, and possibly that gives a bit more hope to other teams to potentially push into that top 4 now. So I think, maybe Eddie Howe regrets maybe the way that he set up for this game. But full of credit to Bournemouth, because Clivert was on a different planet. He was absolutely phenomenal.
Well, seeing a team win by 3 goals at St James's Park, the Carabao Cup's back on, people. Elsewhere, very quickly, Leicester lost 2-0 to Fulham. Emil Smith-Rowe getting a goal. Love that. No idea why Leicester hired Ruud van Nistelrooy. It's a mystery to everybody. West Ham United lost at home 2-0 to Crystal Palace. Palace on a proper run. Mateta on a proper run. Love to see it. Graham Potter kind of figuring out how big a job he has on his hands at West Ham there, I think. And Forest with a huge win, 3-2 over Southampton, in the slightest possibly complimentary terms. Ivan Juric is at least getting Southampton to fight in games. Against Manchester United, they were fantastic, and they almost got back into this game. I think that's the best you're going to get, Southampton fans. I genuinely, but it is a marked improvement than under Martin, I think.
Yes.
Anderson with a great goal, and Chris Wood, of course, scoring another. Forest still in the title race. And if they're in it, we're in it. And the last one is, City beating Ipswich 6-0. Foden, the best player in the world now, of course, but not being so sarcastic. This is a bit of a corner turned for Man City, or is it just that Ipswich are proper crap?
I wouldn't necessarily say Ipswich are crap, but I just think it was one of those games where you expect Man City, with the calibre of players that they've got, and they actually play quite well, is what I would kind of mention as well. I think, yeah, there was a few mistakes, it's fair to say, from Ipswich point of view, but yeah, I think it's one of those games you always automatically write off at the beginning of the season. So the fact that it's happened at this stage, obviously, I think maybe there's a little bit more hype around maybe Ipswich getting a result. I don't think that was ever going to be the case. So I think Ipswich kind of write this off and move on to the next game. But from a Man City perspective, definitely a bit more of a kind of revival hope, kind of uplift. And given that they've got some new players joining in as well, possibly coming at the right time for them.
Nice. And elsewhere this evening, Chalobah straight into the Chelsea team as Chelsea win 3-1 against Wolves. Goals from Tosin, Kukurea and Madueke. Chelsea obviously going through a bit of a rough patch at the minute, but a big win for them. And Reece James kind of getting a string of games together. Don't want to jinx it, but he could actually be playing in the Premier League this year, which would be nice. But guys, that is all of the Premier League action, most of it. I'm sorry again about the timing. We're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk all transfer news and, of course, look forward to some European action. We'll see you there. And we are back. Before we look at all the transfer headlines as of midnight Central European time on a Monday evening, let's look at the European fixture. Starting in the Champions League, the English team's interest. Monaco will be hosting Aston Villa. Lovely little feeling about that. Weird ground. I hope the Villa fans bring their credit cards, because drinking there is going to be very expensive. After that, Liverpool will be hosting Lille. Lille with a fantastic record in the Champions League this year. Of course, beat Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid. Be interesting to see if they can get a result at Anfield. Then we have, that's on Tuesday night. Then we have on Wednesday night, Arsenal hosting Dinamo Zagreb. Fabio Cannavaro taking charge of his first game as Dinamo Zagreb at the Emirates. I hope he doesn't have any tricks up his sleeve. And PSG hosting Man City in the which of the big teams are going to embarrassingly go out of the Champions League new format first derby. It'll be interesting to see that one. PSG with Kvara, of course, and Man City fresh off their 6-0 win. It'll be fascinating to see if they can build their PSG. Paris, obviously a difficult place to play. Adam, take us through the Europa League.
Yeah, there's only two big clubs from the Premier League that will be facing in Europa League action. So on Thursday, the 23rd of January at 5:45, we've got Hoffenheim at home to Tottenham Hotspur, before we later see at 8 p.m, Rory, Man United at home to Rangers, which is going to be a fascinating game in itself. But just for those that are obviously nostalgic about Premier League ex-players, managers, here's a good one for you. Wednesday evening, he starts off his first game for Besiktas. That is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in charge of that club. They're going to face Athletic Club de Bilbao. That's at 3:30 p.m. kickoff time, because I think it's the time zone difference. That's all it is. But otherwise, that is your fixtures in the Europa League, Rory.
I can't wait to see what the scenes are in Manchester with that Rangers game, because I think the last time Rangers were down in Manchester, they absolutely tore the place to pieces for that European final. So it will be interesting to see what happens there. I think there's going to be some very a lot of grown men action there, which will be nice to see on Twitter as I scroll through. I cannot wait. But let's do a little bit of a transfer roundup of today so far. So far, really, the big story was that West Ham going back in again for John Duran. Obviously, in the summer, decided they didn't want to spend the extra $5 million. Now they're chucking $57 million at it. But Aston Villa have rejected it and said no. not massively surprising that Villa are
No.
wanting to keep hold of him. I would think that Ollie Watkins might be more available than Duran at the moment. How do you feel about it?
I think they need both. I'd be brutally honest. I think, unfortunately, they haven't got the depth of players, perhaps, in their squad to sustain both Europa and the league. I'm not surprised that they've rejected it. And I think West Ham blew their chances of signing him in the summer. So they should have signed him. They should have backed that kind of transfer policy. Instead, they went for Fulkrug, and they're regretting it every day, I think. So, yeah, not surprised by that one, Rory. But yeah, one I wanted to highlight was Roman Esse joining Crystal Palace from Millwall. What a signing for a fee of 14 million, which is quite a huge lump sum. It's fair to say. I'm sure it's staggered. I'm not too sure on the intricacies of that deal, but great deal for Millwall. And I think it could be an exciting prospect to see in the next year or two, it's fair to say, because he has been someone of a player that I've been very excited whenever I've seen him play for Millwall. It's fair to say, on the counter-attacks in particular, he's got the trickery of what I would say maybe a cross between Wilfried Zaha and maybe a Lise kind of style of player. So be ready for his maybe explosion potentially in whatever game he decides to come out. But yeah, Rory, any other kind of key transfers that you were surprised at?
Well, Man City obviously shit in the bed and spending a load of money in this transfer window. They have finalised Kusanov, an Uzbek, I think it is, playing for Manchester City. Yeah. Unbelievable scenes, not just a Shomorodov now. They've also got Kusanov. A really exciting centre-back. I'll be really intrigued to see how he did. I remember him playing against Arsenal for Lens, and he was fantastic. Really enjoyed watching him, so it'll be interesting to see him. And of course, for the Serie A Premier League crossover, Dorgu to Manchester United is starting to pick up a little bit of steam. We talk about his recent performance on our Serie A episode. If you're a United fan, maybe go and check that one out, or don't. But Adam, in theory, a very exciting move, makes sense in Amorim's system. I think it would be not the worst transfer, right?
No, I think he's a sensible bit of business. He's someone that is still raw, I would say, arguably, but someone that is agile to play in both right or left-hand sided positions. Got a tremendous amount of stamina, it's fair to say. Real engine on him, and his delivery is very good as well. He has contributed with a few goals for Lecce as well. So we've got to kind of put in mind that he is playing for a team that isn't traditionally associated with the top end of Serie A and therefore a lot more exposed. So I think that's probably elements to his game that I think he will apply in the Premier League. I think the pace will probably suit him better as well, potentially, given the type of player he is. But yeah, Man United fans, please treat him with, I suppose, a sense of supportiveness as you do sign him, because I feel that there will be some errors and I think he will learn along the way. So yeah, it'll be one of those that please treat him kindly.
Yeah, I don't want to see another Serie A prospect ruined. Please, just stop it. We enjoy them. I'm going to have to put a transfer embargo on Serie A players going to United. It's just... They keep ruining them. But yeah, that is all of the transfer action, really. I'm still desperately refreshing the page to see if we confirm Šeško or not yet, but I might have to wait until tomorrow or transfer deadline day. Let's see if we last that long. But guys, as always, thank you for joining us. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. It does mean the world to us. Adam, anything to say to the listener before I send them home?
Just quickly, if you are on the Apple podcast listening to us, please do us a favour. Just give us a rating and a review. That would be appreciated. Obviously, you can do that also on Spotify, but it's only a rating there as opposed to a review. So just for the balance, that would be really appreciated. But otherwise, Rory, let's send them off.
Beautiful. Go and check out our Serie A episode. We slag off Milan and talk quite nicely again about Juve, which doesn't happen every week. Yeah. And of course, talking about Napoli with a huge win over Atalanta. So go and check that out. It will be on your feed right now. Go and do it now. Good. Thank you. On social media, we are at Anglo-Italian pod. Still don't get that right. 5 years, still getting it wrong. At Anglo-Italian pod, except for Twitter, where it's at Italian Anglo pod. Yeah, give us a follow. We are very active on all of those things. We'll see you there, and we'll see you next time. Cheers. See you later.
Take care.